Okay, I'm here with Muhammad Abdullah. Muhammad, to tell the story about what happened recently with you.
Okay, well, on or about May 26th, I was
2009.
2009 exercising my freedom of speech, freedom of movement to the personnel at the Pomona Police Department and also the fire department, which is directly next door. And I was basically talking about 9/11 truth as usual. I included some of the war crimes that have occurred in Iraq and Afghanistan, and introduced some new information as far as what our government's been involved in. And on that day, I was leaving, and I was pulled over by Pomona police. And I asked why I was being pulled over, and he said because of something that had occurred a few minutes earlier back at the police station. So that's where it began, and I showed him my driver's license, and he said that the officer that had taken the report would arrive in a few moments, and I would be made aware of what it was I was being stopped for. So that's basically where it started.
To start out, it was basically a traffic stop. You didn't know what you were being stopped for.
Right.
And then what happened from there?
Well, from there, police officer Sergeant Cole, Corporal Tucker, and Officer Valencia were on the scene, and Corporal Tucker directed me to get out of the car. As I got out of the car, he asked me basically what name do I go by. I said Muhammad Abdullah, and he proceeded to call me by what we've referred to in the lexicon of the African American Muslim convert or revert is he started referring to me by my former slave name. And I told him that was no longer my name. In fact, I told him my legal name was Muhammad Abdullah.
That's the name on your driver's license?
That's the name on my driver's license. That's the name on my social security card. That's the name on my paychecks. That's the name on my military records. They all reflect that name.
But yet he was calling you by your name you previously went by?
Yeah, it was, it was an attempt to provoke me, to agitate me.
And what was his name, the one doing this?
This was Corporal Tucker. Corporal Tucker. And basically they told me that I had said some things that offended some people, some employees or something like that, back at the back around the area of the police department. And that the sergeant wanted to make sure that I was aware of why I was being stopped.
Okay.
So basically that was it. And the other officer, Officer Valencia, basically began to question me as to why I was always by the police department in 9/11, not why I'm always talking about 9/11. I said, well, basically it's my right, it's my freedom of movement, my freedom of speech. So he basically said he didn't give a rat's ass, we don't believe it. And I said, well, it's not for me to make you believe it, it's just my right to say it. So I just kind of went back and forth, and
Now when he said, quote, we, as if he's speaking for who?
Well, it implied he was speaking for other police officers.
In reality, you told me you had a lot of police officers come up to you and say they agreed with you, right?
Well, basically they acknowledged what I was saying in the positive and the affirmative by giving a thumbs up, and he in turn said, well, they probably were mocking me or something like that.
And several took DVDs from you, did they not, over time?
Well, over a period of time, yeah.
9/11 Truth. What DVDs were you passing?
Well, actually the DVDs was Loose Change. One of the corporals who was a detective, I gave him a copy of 9/11. It has 4 DVDs on one DVD. 9/11 Mysteries, Loose Change Second Edition, Terror Storm, and David Ray Griffin. And those are some of the DVDs that I have for distribution.
And you've had some female officers or employees come up to you and speak with you numerous times, right? Outside the Pomona PD.
Yeah, as they were getting off, several have spoken, waved, you know, in kind of a cheerful manner. So basically, I didn't really, those that they claim were offended, I really couldn't understand who they were talking about. But anyway, to let me go on with the story, this Corporal Tucker basically was telling me that I had said some things that were relatively offensive. So I made the comment that, well, it was referring to some pictures that I had of war crimes, and such as the photos from Abu Ghraib and so on and so forth. And he asked me if I had them. I said, yeah, I have them. They're in my car. I can get them. As I went to get them, he said, no, that's all right. I'll get them. And he proceeded to go into the car and take the pictures out, which I really hadn't given permission to do. But he took them, and they were going to be kept as evidence. And I did receive a property slip for the they actually are scanned photos of torture, rape.
Photos that had government photos that were later released to the media, to the press.
As far as I'm aware of, yes. Or they were released some kind of way. And basically
available on the public websites.
Right. So he said those would be kept as evidence, and that they would give me a property receipt for it, which states that I can get it after 30 days.
So basically, what do you think they're trying to do? They're just trying to shut you up, or?
Well, I see this as a form of harassment and retaliation, because I've been like a pit bull on 9/11. In fact, in the restraining order, there is no mention of 9/11. 9/11 has been the central theme of my talks and presentations. So, and it's going to always be the central theme. 9/11. It's right here, just like it says.
Yep.
So, but in the actual restraining order, there's no mention of 9/11.
That's interesting omission, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very interesting omission. I mean, by virtue of the fact that they have 9/11 on the side of their patrol cars, but many of them don't really realize what actually happened on 9/11.
Now, touch on how you believe this is your, I would call it a God-given right to free speech, and also you're morally obligated to tell the truth about what happened on 9/11.
Well, yeah, I would love to elaborate on that. I had, as I said before, from our other encounter up there on Foothill and Gary, I'm a Muslim, and this 9/11 was laid at the foot of the Muslims. And as a Muslim, I morally obligated to speak out and to speak the truth about 9/11, as far as Muslims having nothing to do with 9/11. And basically the government engineered and orchestrated 9/11, and it was blamed on Islam and Muslims as a pretext to invade Afghanistan, Iraq, and who knows where else this imperial empire plans to strike next. But, well, I think we have an idea, maybe Iran. But yeah, I do have a God-given right to speak out where I choose, when I choose. I did not, as it said in the restraining order, stalk, harass, or commit battery against any Pomona PD employees or personnel. So this is clearly, in my opinion, a retaliation and harassment on the part of not all, but some, I would say maybe brass in the Pomona PD. And also I've noticed the FBI has been, recently I've noticed the FBI going into the Pomona Police Department. So I would assume there's some connection there, because on the day that I was pulled over, I noticed the FBI go into the Pomona Police Department.
Now in the restraining order I was reading, they included the words eccentric. What other words did they include that were very broad and subjective type words? You know?
Well, like all Pomona employees.
Right. Oh yeah, the restraining order is supposedly in protection of all Pomona employees, right?
Correct.
City and police department employees.
Yeah.